really excited. We have Gonçalo J. Costa. Gonçalo lives in Portugal and studies insects. He travels across the Mediterranean Sea to the country of Morocco in northern Africa, where he studies cicadas, a poorly known insect, in order to learn more about the bug and set up the future for conservation for cicadas. So we're bringing in Gonçalo. Hello, welcome.
Can you hear me well?
I can hear you great. Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. So can I start sharing the screen?
Yes, please.
Okay, then.
We can bring it up.
So let me just allow, and here we are. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, I will bring it up. Do you see it here?
Okay, so may I?
Go ahead.
Okay, so hello everyone, I'm Gonçalo Costa, and my work with insects is being a taxonomist. So ever since I was a kid, I was fascinated with insects and I loved insects, but I really quite didn't know the name behind my obsession. So when I was looking at a National Geographic documentary, I saw the name in like title box, like there was a guy in the middle of the jungle and he grabbed like a bug and he said, "This is a new species." And I was like, "Shit, I want to do that." And fast forward like 20 years afterwards, and I'm doing just that, but not on a jungle, but in a kind of a mountain or inside a cashew field, for example, when I'll talk afterwards. And it's a really fun way to look at our biodiversity, because when you change your lens, you can see like fascinating things. Just for example, in your own balcony or in your own garden, you just need to change your lens and look, for example, at a microscopic level, or not at a microscopic level, but at levels just low, just below, and you find fascinating things. So as you're saying, I looked at Morocco because my master's was with the Moroccan cicadas, and I was really because in Portugal they are kind of all studied, but in Morocco there's like nothing. There's like 13 described species there, but we had friends there that went before us, and they said, well, there's a lot more than 13 species, because I was in the field and I heard like 6 or 7 different. So before I get into it, let me give you a small tale on cicada biology. Okay. So their life cycle. Cicadas spend a lot of their time underground. Some cicadas, for example, those who live in Chicago, I believe it was in the past year, had their brood X cicadas popping up after, I think, 17 years below ground. And even though most cicadas aren't as spectacularly long-lived as those cicadas, those brood cicadas, most of them live about 3 to 4 years below ground, feeding on roots. And when it's the summer, they start to climb up those burrows, and they cling to a plant or something, and then just molt out of their old skin, and they give rise to the winged adult. And the winged adult, like the one we see on the right, has the ability to sing. So only the male cicada is able to sing. And when it does so, it is to attract the attention of the female. And this calling song is super interesting because it's species specific. So, for example, I live in Portugal, and when I hear, for example, in the city now we have a huge heat wave, and they are starting to come out, and I heard, for example, like, and I know for sure that this is a cicada orni. But for example, if I go a bit to the field and I start to hear, for example, like those garden blowers, I think it's the correct term. I don't know, I can't remember. Like the ones that sprinkle garden sprinklers, then it's a Tectigetal argentata. So armed with this knowledge, we need to first get to step 0, which is plan it thoroughly. I cannot stress this enough, because when I did my first expedition, it wasn't well planned as I hoped so, and we spent like 2 or 3 days searching for cicadas without any success, because the places that we were going were not the places that cicadas wanted. So we took this picture. This was the the team for that day, for that year, sorry. And this is a crater, volcano crater in the Middle Atlas, and here we caught lots of cicadas. But during the winter, it's completely filled with snow. So the slopes that you see are actually skiing slopes. And it's very funny because during the entirety of the year it's covered in snow, but during the summer they start to emerge the cicadas. So you can imagine how tough they are sometimes. So when you are in the field, for example, this is a beautiful field that we found a new species of cicada, and we need to record it. So the first thing that you do when you hear a cicada, and they might be sometimes tricky to hear, is get right close to the individual that is singing. So what we do is that we grab my trusty, I have it here, my trusty microphone, and you can imagine us because this is a bit clunky. So we are on the field and we are grabbing this microphone, and we are going around like starting to hear a cicada, and when we start to hear it, we need to approach it, but approach it very, very slowly, because if we approach it too fast, then she gets startled and she flies away, and then we need to restart our hunt. And then we start to record her, like, come on, give me just a few more seconds. Come on, don't fly away. Please don't blow any wind, because the wind will shut them up. Okay, perfect. And then we have that precious data, which is the acoustic data. And afterwards, and it's the trickiest part, it's to catch it. It's so hard to catch a cicada. You can hear it very well, but then they are so cryptic because they are so very small, some of the species, and they hide so very well. And I remember the first time I went to this expedition in Morocco, my fellow colleagues were catching cicadas by the left and the right, and I was like, come on, give me a cicada, come on. And I remember the first cicada I caught, I kind of crushed it, like I half crushed it with the metal frame of the butterfly net. And I was like, okay, screw it, it's perfect. I grabbed it and I put it in alcohol, and that was game over. So it's very, very hard to catch a cicada, and it's even harder to catch a cicada that you recorded. And if you do that, that's perfect, because it means that you have the individual that sang specifically that way. And then you have also the females, because females do not sing. So the only way you can catch them is when they are mating. And that is something that is also very rare to do. And it's kind of a bummer, because they are mating and then, come on, you catch them. It's not cool. So the step 3 is to store the sample. And it's a very, very hard to do for me to grab a cicada. Now it's a bit less, because now I'm a bit more versed into it. But it was very hard for me to kill my first cicada, even though it was half crushed to death and she was like suffering a lot. Putting it in the alcohol, because I love them so much, and seeing the one alive or half alive, it was so hard for me to put it in the alcohol. And when we are working with these species that, even though they are not described and known for science, they are still they are quite rare to find. So probably they might be endangered, or some populations have very low individuals. So you need to collect them like parsimoniously. So you need to do like, okay, so I can hear like 5 or 10 males in these fields. So I'll collect maybe 1, 2, or 3. Because then you shouldn't go with an attitude, for example, like the past entomologists of yore, when you had like 30 or 50 insects from the same population, from the same spot. Well, that doesn't abode anymore for like conservation statuses of cicadas, because you're probably doing an active force of extinction of that population if you catch like 40 or 50 species specimens in a single place. So you need to catch them wisely. So probably between 5 and 10 cicadas per population, if it's a good quality, in a good health, then it's perfect for then the genetic analysis and further. So Then we need to compare with the known cicadas that we have. So we need to look at the descriptions, and the descriptions, unfortunately, are from the past century. Sorry. And for example, I'll bring you here figure 1, which has Eurifera riboti. So this is the holotype, and Eurifera riboti is a very, very beautiful cicada. Even though the first picture doesn't show it, the second one shows it perfectly. So you can see it's like, I even dubbed it Black Pearl Cicada, because you can see it in the field, so it's in a perfectly green fields, and then the cicada is pure black with a very red abdomen, and you can see here 2 of these cicadas mating. So that was what I was saying, so we caught this mating couple. Sorry, guys. And one of the things that we do is like, if it's a particularly difficult to access a museum, or the specimens have been lost, then we need to go to the site where they were first caught, which we call them the topotypes. We go there, and hopefully we're able to find them, because sometimes, even though you are in the same site, probably they won't be emerging that year. So probably only the next year we'll be able to catch them, or in 2 years. We don't know yet. So it's a bit of a lucky strike for us to go to the field in that year and collect the cicadas. So it's a continuous effort that we need to do every year to have things mapped and looking like super spiffy. And then we need to get our evidence right, which is step 5. So for example, one of the things that we do at our laboratory is doing the integrative taxonomy. So what does this mean? We try to assemble several arguments from several different disciplines within biology. For example, when we look at morphology, most of the descriptions that we have are made basically purely on morphology. And we know that that's wrong, because when you look only at morphology, you're skipping a lot of cicadas that kind of look similar, but they sing differently. And as I said, the song is specific, which means that 2 cicadas that look the same but sing differently are different species. And then also we look at the genetics. So the genetic helps us to further, how can I say it? To reinforce our argument that we are looking at scientifically accurate species. So one of the things that I'm trying to implement is that I'm colorblind, so I don't see colors very, very well. So when I was describing my first species, I described the colors like brown, dark brown, light brown, green, and my advisor, she said, Gonçalo, I think you might be colorblind. I said, nah, I can't be. Well, because this cicada is also orange and yellow, and it's like, nah. So she actually had to describe the color of the species for me. So now one of the things that I'm trying to implement is using an RGB color scheme to actually to quantitatively describe the cicada color, which I think hasn't been made many times during the description of species. So I'm trying to do that in the upcoming descriptions that I'll be making. So when we present our case, so we have here our arguments, and then we need to look at species concepts. So as I was saying, for example, if we're looking at a morphological species concept, then probably what we will be seeing is just one species. But in this gray area where most species exist today, several species concepts will argue. For example, the species concepts of Mayr, which is one that most people learn in school about biologically separate entities. So if they do not interbreed, they are different species. That may not be accurate, because sometimes species, they actually interbreed in hybrid zones, which means that sometimes, well, you might be having 2 different species in this kind of gray zone, this gray area. And what we need to do is look at several types of arguments. For example, I mentioned those 3, like morphology, bioacoustic, genetics, but you can actually look at ecology, like well, I mostly look at only then ecology, but you can also use like biochemical analysis. For example, Drosophila has like these kind of glands that emit certain biochemicals. Sorry, that differentiate between species. So when you do, for example, so this is the dedicated species concept, which is like a generalized species concept. I love talking about species concepts, so please stop me because I can talk like ad nauseum. So to further it, I just want to say that what we do is when we look at this gray zone, we need to take into argument, and it's our job of the scientists of the taxonomists to say, well, I define this species based on these traits. Probably these traits don't differ it from these other species that are closely related, but mainly based on my experience and my knowledge, I can say for sure that these are two species. And then you present your arguments, and then you'll name it. So naming is my favorite part because you can kind of go let loose of your imagination. So, for example, when I had my cicada, I think I hope that you are able to hear, but if you are not able to hear, can you hear it? Okay, so
maybe we could turn up the volume a bit on this.
Okay, I can simulate the song. So this cicada, Berberigeta di melódica, she kind of sings like, and this kind of sounds like a fart. And when we were on the field, we said it's the farting cicada. So we wanted to name it Berberigeta, which means the cicada from the barbarians, because it was found in a barbarian region, Perto melodica, which translates literally from Latin, saying the cicada with the melodious farts. But my advisor at the time, he said, no, you're not going to name it the farting cicada. So unfortunately, the farting cicada will be on the future, but we name this the melodica, the cicada with two melodies. And then the other was Tetigetalna afromista. Afromista because this is the only Tetigetalna that we found in Africa so far. So we kind of wanted to use like a romantic name and use afromista. And we can use the names for conservation purposes, because if we find like a really cool sounding name, it will attract media attention much easier. And then it's easier for us to share our case and argue with the media and then have buzz around it. So I want to make a small exercise with you. So we found the cicada. It's small. It's a very orange abdomen, and it was found in Tangier. So can you guess the name that you're going to give this cicada? I cannot see the comments or anything, so if someone wants to speak up.
I'll add it here in the chat. So what's the question again?
What's the name of the cicada? So it's from Tangier, it's small, and it's orange.
Anyone in the chat?
No?
Yeah, from Tangier, let's see.
Well, can I spoil it?
Can I give it a guess? Let's see. Tangier. We have orange. We have somebody. We have Natasha from the chat says orange Tangier.
Kind of like that. It's called tangerine. So like the fruits, because tangerine in Portuguese means tangerina, which is the exact translation to the cicada.
Nice. Natasha, good job. Yeah, very cool.
It's called tangerina. So we can give these names and kind of create like a buzz, and people will start laughing about it. And when you associate an emotion with something, then it's much easier for one person to talk about it to the next guy. And I think that this giving names that are about the characteristic of the cicada or where she comes from, it's a great way to create buzz around them. And then you need to publish it. And publishing, it's so very hard sometimes. And you need to convince now the community, the scientific community, with your arguments whether it's not a valid species or not. Most of them are not. Probably then you have to go back and then do further studies, but most of them are also. So you can also have, for example, in 2017, we had these 2 new species described and many more await. So the next is the follow through. So I cannot stand idle seeing my cicadas going to waste because, come on, I describe them. I kind of have like this paternal feeling of, well, I want to protect them. I want them to last a generation on the field, not sitting in a museum drawer collecting dust. No, I do not want that. So, for example, this is one of the problems that we have in Morocco. We have here a fence that in one side you have a lush oasis of flowers, plants, bushes, trees, bugs, everything, and then in the other side nothing. Like you have barren rock because goats go there and eat it, and they are stopped by this fence. But unfortunately, these fences they do not last forever, and sometimes they topple, and sometimes goats go in, and the herders the shepherds go in and also let goats eat everything. So in order for us to have a good conservation of these cicadas, because they are brand new cicada discovered for science, we kind of have some issues because they are brand new. We don't have much data, so we need to like hasten the data that we collect from them in order to protect them much more accurately, and probably have conservation efforts that, for example, only let the goats in these oases after the cicadas lay their eggs or the nymphs go to the ground and burrow. So you still have lots of questions on how to do it. And then, finally, we have engagement. Engage. So I learned this lesson from one of the projects that I'm in, which is in Guinea-Bissau. And I'm actually a pest consultant. So in one hand, I'm trying to preserve cicadas, and in the other, I'm trying to kill off pests. So it's a kind of dichotomy. And what we do in Guinea-Bissau is awesome because the farmers, they look at the cashew as a cash crop, and 90% of the country's richness comes from cashew. So we have these amazing people that you see in the photo that are super worried about their country, and I think that is amazing in a country with so much corruption like Guinea-Bissau. Unfortunately, we have these people that want the best for their country, and it's a very cool feeling when you are in the field, and then a kid comes along towards you and says, in their language, oh, what are you doing? Show me what are you doing. Then we show them the bugs that are eating the cashews, and they're, oh, I saw there one there, and then they grab us by the hand and they come there and show us. So engagement when you are working in the field and the people see that you are excited with your job, it's very easy to it's like an excitement virus because you can spread it very fast, and people are actually very curious because when they see a guy with this in its hands or with collecting with a net, they naturally come to you and say, oh, what are you doing? And when you have their attention, when you have their curiosity, then it's so much easier to have the engagement. So what I'm trying to do in Morocco is to try and do this what we do in Guinea-Bissau. And I think it's like an amazing job that my boss, Filipa, which is the one in the center, just below Amidou, and Engineer Rosa and Paul, but sorry, she's like the one that has her head cut off down below. She's doing like this amazing job, and hopefully she can talk in the next year, who knows. Actually, to finish up, we're going to Morocco this 1st of June. So please follow our adventures at my Instagram at the final price. Hopefully you will have some good news. And we're actually doing the crowdfunding campaign in our Instagram. So if you want to contribute, we are around like 300 euros short to get some power banks. And all of your help is welcomed. And thank you so much for hearing me. And I hope I did well. Thank you so much.
Yes, wow, thank you so much. That was really interesting because you talk about all these the 10 steps that you need to be a conservationist, and it's much more than just going out there and finding bugs. You're not just in the field, you're doing so much other work and working with so many other people.
You just stop the stream, can I?
Yeah, we're out of screen share, so thank you so much. We have time for a couple questions. I'm going to get started from the chat. We have Natasha who asks, what is the longest time cicadas could burrow? Is 17 years or more? So we'll start with that.
17 years is the limit that we know of. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And do you think you might discover something might be longer? No?
No, probably not.
No. All right.
Yeah. I hope so, but 17 is a long time.
So then the second question is, how does climate change affect cicadas worldwide?
So that is something that I struggle a lot, because cicadas, they do not tend to move a lot. So when a cicada emerges from its burrow, it kind of stays there because the males want to sing, and when the males disperse, they are not singing. So that's kind of an issue. So they tend to stay in the same place because the conditions are perfect there. But with climate change, the perfect conditions are starting to dwindle and decrease and decrease. So the cicadas are probably, for example, if the next best place is like 2 kilometers away, the cicadas won't be able to disperse because they need to be constantly drinking and eating the plants. Xylem. Okay, I can't remember. Sorry. So it's a very tricky. When we look at climate change, particularly in Morocco, it's very, very hard because Morocco is being stricken by ever increasing temperatures. I saw, for example, today that in CD Suzanne, I can't remember the second name of the city, it was 45 degrees in May. So you can see how hot it is now. And with climate change, then you have, for example, overgrazing. As I said, the goats start to encroach ever more over the cicadas, and then you have the Sahara that is starting to climb up. So that is a very, very issue that we have. Climate change. Well, it impacts everyone.
Yeah, it's great the work that you're doing. The more knowledge that we have about these species, the more we can track and know how climate change is going to impact them. So thank you for doing your work.
Thank you so much.
One more question that I think we have time for here.
Yeah.
Bellin in the chat. That's amazing, Gonçalo. Apart from naming a new species, have you found any species that was wrongly described and had to correct it?
That is so hard to do because that's much harder to do. We have some of those. How can I say it? So you need to go to the field, you need to collect one of the species, like the topotypes from that place, and then you need to go to the other place and collect them. And then if you have the holotypes, it would be amazing, but many times you do not have them. And the best thing would be like to grab a leg from the holotypes, from the original descriptions, and try to have ancient DNA taken out of it. But it's a very expensive effort, and you need to have you need to have your groove on to do that. So it's describing is cool. But like collapsing cinnamons, it's much harder, I can tell you.
Very neat. Naming a species sounds like the coolest thing a conservationist can do. I'm sure we're all thinking about different ways that we would name our species that we've discovered. So thank you so much for sharing your work. I think this concludes our morning session. And we really appreciate all the work you're doing, and really cool to learn a little bit more about cicadas.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brianna.